Welcome to the Couples Cruise to Transformation Week 5. We have had many conversations thus far, and we're going to have a brand new conversation today for you. And before we get into that, what I would like to do is just present everyone to the intention of the cruise. The Couples Cruise to Transformation is designed to have participants create conversations that create relatedness, possibility, and opportunity to take actions that cause an environment of love, respect, and connectedness. As a result, participants will learn and practice the distinctions collected from a variety of sources, leaving both partners with the satisfaction of having made a massive contribution to their relationship while exploring and creating a new future. And it will be fun. All right, so last week, we talked about finances and went over a few different things that could be done around finances. And I dug into my own situation a little bit and started to look at how do I create the flow from the reservoir where all the money goes into the different areas. And so I'm taking that on to create different accounts for all the fixed expenses and a different account for the discretionary funds, right? The things that don't cost the same every month. So did anybody else take anything on who was present or watched the recording last week?
Yeah, I'm taking on doing a review on my 401k contributions,
All right.
making sure that I'm,
Maxing that thing out.
yeah, maxing the matching as well as the, for me, I qualify for that catch-up limit, right? That's a higher limit after a certain age, so I need to do that too. So there's two things.
You put a whole bunch more in.
And I really like that technology you introduced us to last week with the reservoir thing. So I've got that on the list to implement.
Perfect. And so if you missed that, and you're here today or watching the recording, all of those videos are available on the YouTube channel and on the Facebook channel, and both are Magic Money Leverage. So just search that and you'll find them. So today we are talking about communication and creating an environment where everyone can share and be heard. And so without any further delays, I would like to introduce Tazima. So let me make sure that Tazima gets spotlighted here. So we've got her beautiful smile up for everyone. And so Tazima is our relationship expert and pleasure coach, among other things. And so she's bringing a wealth of experience and knowledge to our conversations here on the Couples Cruise to Transformation, and giving us some things to consider and think about and practice. And so, Tazima, what do you have for us tonight?
Well, I'm really, really excited about sharing some ideas around navigating intimacy in communication. So when we talk to one another, things happen as we engage with one another, whether that's in conversation or touch or nonverbal communication. We're always communicating with one another. Eye contact or lack of eye contact, touching or not touching, talking or not talking. So there are all these ways that we talk, that we communicate to one another. So today's topic is navigating intimacy and communication. And just to clarify, I am a sex coach and pleasure mentor for high achieving, people pleasing women over 35. You might fit this category if you find yourself overthinking, overgiving, and feeling overwhelmed. You might be in this category if everyone relies on you and they can definitely count on you. and you might be feeling exhausted or tired and falling asleep in things in the middle of things that you're doing. And so, yes, when it comes to couples, I also coach the people who are in relationship with these ladies. So there's a lot of that. And also who I coach guys who fall into similar behavior patterns. So if you identify with what I described, I'll give you more information on that later. And before I get into the content, I just want to identify that a couple weeks ago, we had a few tools that are super helpful that Vicki brought to us, as well as some that I discussed. And those are the bank system. And Vicki specifically shared different personality types, ways of being, as well as communication styles. I also introduced a little more information about love language, and I shared the quiz with you. And if you didn't see that information, then definitely you can go back and review that. But today's topic is navigating intimacy and communication. And there are 3 concepts that I'm going to focus on today, and that is communication, breach, and repair. This is the process by which we connect or disconnect, because stuff happens as you go through life. That's just what's happening. It's not that we can never sort of avoid having this kind of dynamic. It happens in all kinds of relationships. So for example, in a non-romantic relationship, perhaps a friendship or a work relationship, you might not be in contact with someone for quite some time. So that is not necessarily a breach, like a negative breach per se, but you are kind of out of contact, and it might mean that you need to establish rapport if, for example, you want to invite them to an event. So if you haven't talked to them in 6 months and you're like, hey, come to my birthday party, you might have to say something before that. So that's a non-romantic example of what I'm talking about. But today I'm primarily going to be focusing on romantic relationships. And when you get these concepts, these are transferable skills that you can use in all your relationships. One of the things I love about communication and relationships is that these skills are transferable. You just got to change the vocabulary a little bit. All right. So I'm going to have y'all participate with me in the chat. And I know there are a few folks in here who don't have their cameras on. I would love to see you. So, I know that you're seeing me, but I would love to see you if you're on. And if you're not available, that's all right. All right. So first is connection. So connection, breach, and repair. So connection, what do y'all think connection is in the context of connection, breach, and repair? Or you can give me any of your definitions for any 3 of those, but let's just focus on connection right now. What is connection to you? You can either type it in the chat or unmute and share.
Stephen
Yes.
Kimberly raised a hand.
Go for it.
Oh,
Unmute yourself.
I can put it in the chat. I want to make sure I'm following the rules here.
Absolutely.
Connect in communication for me, especially at an intimate level, is that I'm being gotten and they're being gotten. So that as we're communicating with each other, both of us are literally connected in the way that we're communicating.
And when you say gotten, you mean like understood?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Awesome. Okay, Aris, thank you. Freedom to communicate anything and everything. So that is being connected. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I am also going to add in that rapport has been established, whether it's over a few minutes or years or decades. Okay, so rapport is very dynamic. And the way to know if you're in connection with someone is if you're in rapport. Again, with that distance, you're out of rapport, you're out of connection. So less connection means sort of emotional or situational relationship distance. More connection equals more closeness. So the more connection you have, the closer you feel. The less connection, the more kind of distance or static in the connection that you're experiencing with another person. when we take connection deeper, that is what I call intimacy. So super close. And one thing I really love about romantic relationships specifically is that romantic relationships give us the opportunity to know another person and be known by another person on more levels than any other relationship we have. There's no other relationship other than a romantic relationship that someone can possibly know you on way more levels. So even our closest friends won't necessarily know us in more intimate ways. We may have friendship intimacy, but we won't have things like sexual intimacy with people who are our friends. Family, of course, goes without saying. There's only certain levels of intimacy that we can have with family, and some, depending on our relationship with our family, we may specifically cut certain things off, or there may be certain people who are our friends. We only talk about this set of things with them, but not that set of things. We may explore certain ideas with certain friends, and then a whole other set of friends, we explore other ideas. This goes for people who are, for example, parents versus people who aren't parents. There are things that you can create rapport around, or subjects or topics that you can create rapport around as you relate to others. So people who have the same work, for example, can relate to each other better than people who don't. So all of those pieces are things that contribute to intimacy in our connection. One thing I like to share with my clients and anyone who will listen is that the only way to the land of intimacy is through the valley of vulnerability. So part of the reason that we keep ourselves sort of distant from people is because it feels vulnerable. We don't want to feel that. And vulnerability has been vilified and is considered dangerous in this society. So we tend to avoid it. And what I have found is that the more people are willing to be vulnerable, and the more that it feels safe for folks to feel vulnerable, then the more intimacy that can be created. All right, I just want to check in with my folks who are on live, and those of you who are watching virtually over time in the future. What do you think about that idea of intimacy, connection, and vulnerability? What comes up for you?
That it doesn't work when you give it to somebody that hasn't earned your trust.
So when you're not in rapport, for example, is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying vulnerability is great unless you are vulnerable with somebody that hasn't earned your trust.
Got you. So not earning trust. So in terms of what I'm sharing with you, someone who hasn't earned your trust is not in enough rapport with you to get that intimacy, get access to that intimacy. Is that what you're, or just, you're just on trust?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. All right. And so let me just ask you one more question, April. When it comes to trust, for you, what's important for someone to have earned your trust? Like, what's a piece of it for you that is important that you have in order to have that trust established?
To do anything that they said they were going to do.
So integrity with their
Yeah.
work. Got it. Cool. Awesome. Huge. So there are different things for different people that are important to them. Any other ideas around this idea of intimacy, communication, vulnerability?
I love what April said, and just to add to the conversation, being free to say whatever's there without any kind of harshness or judgment, or and like that, like I know that the people I'm most in connected with and in a deep intimate relationship with,
Mhm.
that they never listen to anything I have to say from anywhere but love. Like there's just pure love there in the space. And the richness of our relationships are such, and they've developed, like April was speaking to, over time, and the trust, there's so much trust there that no matter what I'm saying, even if it's an upset with them, they don't take it that way. Like they literally don't take it that way, and vice versa, right? Like if they're just upset and they're voicing their upset, and even if it's directed right at me, that there's nothing there but love. Like love is all that is there, affinity is all that is there. um and there's that, like, that deep vulnerability of like 100% respect, love, and care for the other person, and vice versa, right? So it's a dance between generosity and respect.
Okay.
Right? So like generosity for that original, initial original thing that is coming out of me, and then respect, right? Like as soon as it's being said, of like, oh my God, it's like just so beautiful that I'm with someone that will just let me say what I need to say in the moment that I need to say it. And then we all take a nice deep breath. And, I either take responsibility for what I just said, or they give me grace, to say, listen, you don't even have to clean that shit up, because I know what you're going through right now. Like a perfect example, I was just, with someone all day who's grieving the loss of their mother. And there's things that they're dealing with and saying, right, that could be construed as hurtful or whatever. And it's like, no, like, I love you, and you can say anything. Like now, right, like I have to be responsible for like when it gets ouchy, right? And also though, getting like they're going through something. If I hope, hopefully that makes, but that's that whole vulnerability. Like they're vulnerable, I'm vulnerable, we're vulnerable, and there's a safety that's there. There's a safety that's present, and there's a love and trust that's present.
Great. I love that. I love that. Thanks for sharing that. And I've got some similar echoes from Aris in the chat. A space of unconditional acceptance without prejudgments, and in such a space, love becomes present and by default. So I want to say something about both what you were saying, Kimberly, and what Aris has put here into this conversation about emotional safety. Part of what's so vulnerable about communicating in intimate ways in our relationships is that emotional safety isn't necessarily guaranteed. Part of what you were talking about, Kimberly, is established relationship where it's absolutely safe because of the conversations that you've already had with this person, because of what y'all have created together. It's not necessarily something that is automatic just because you show up with someone, especially when things are new, especially when there's been a breach. It might not feel safe. And yet we can still bravely be vulnerable. And if it feels scary to do that, guess what? Welcome to being human. And that's why we have support like coaches or other kinds of help and relationship professionals that help us to become brave, or have or use tools that help create a scaffolding so that we can do that brave, vulnerable thing that will create the intimacy that we desire. Okay. So it's not just guaranteed just because we say, I need you to be a safe space for me. That person may not be capable of that. They literally may not be capable. Either they don't have the skill, or they have something going on for them that renders them incapable. And so it feels absolutely risky. And guess what? That's human relating. Okay. That's literally how we show up in the world. And that's why it takes bravery. All right, now let's talk about when it doesn't work. When we don't have that connection, we don't have that intimacy. That's the space of the breach. So we've got connection, breach, and repair. And so now we're running into the space of breach. Something happens, and now you don't feel as close. talk to me about either in the chat or you can unmute. What happens for you when you notice a breach? What is a breach to you? How do you know you're in a connection breach? Talk to me about what your experience is.
I know I'm in a breach when they stop communicating in a way that is with it's no longer loving. It's angry or judgmental or critical, resentful. That's an absence of affinity.
Okay. And how do you know that there's anger or disconnection, or like how long for you do you determine like, oh, they're not communicating with me? How do you know? Just what's in your experience, not that there's a right or wrong answer.
Either the way they communicate or the way they're not communicating.
So the words they're using?
The words, the tone, body language.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that, Aris. Steve, you had something?
When I tend to notice it is when there is a rapid fire, one thing after another of what's wrong, right? Or what's not being accomplished. And for me, that gets overwhelming to get, 3 or 4, 10 things, thrown at me all at once without any opportunity to clean them up, right? And so I'd say that's when I know there's been a breach, is when more than one upset at a time is getting tossed at me.
Rapid fire complaints.
Uh-huh. And lots of pointing those things out too, right? That's what happens here.
Cool. All right, awesome. And so, yeah, that can be painful. And Kimberly is sharing that she feels physical pain when there's a breach, and Steve feels frustrated, and it occurs like a rug being pulled out from underneath them. And yeah, I get that. So yeah, breach, I identify as being out of rapport. So connection is in rapport and breach is out of rapport. Things are not going well. The rapid fire complaints, the attitude, the challenges, the distance or the silence. So basically something happened. You may or may not know. If you're on the receiving end of the breach, you might not know why there's a breach. You don't have the information, but something happened. And then no matter what happens, some emotion emerges on one or both sides once that breach is established or happens. Okay. And then the other tricky part is that sometimes judgments are made. So we might feel like, oh, well, this breach is happening, that means that, and then we create all this meaning about what it means even prior to having a conversation with the person.
Yes.
And that's when we really get in trouble. That's super breach time, okay? So sometimes breach can get wider when the emotions happen and there's not communication, or there's no capacity for communication, and then we either jump to conclusions or we make something mean something, and we don't actually, and we project what we think is happening over onto the other person. Does all that make sense?
Yeah. And I'm going to out myself. I start listening to them and looking for evidence of those judgments.
Confirmation bias in the house. Like, oh, and then, yeah, so that's something to watch for ourselves, in ourselves, of, am I actually curious in my listening? Am I open to what this person is saying? Or am I just already in my place of, this is what it is? And I don't have this person can't say anything else to me that will change my mind.
There's a saying that the more I insist that something is the way that I see it, the more communication becomes impossible.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we sort of paint ourselves into a corner in those kinds of situations. And the piece that I want to highlight here is the what happened is always subjective. Human beings are not objective at all.
What?
Not at all. We all are subjective. We literally, like, there's no other human being that can see something from exactly your perspective. Even if you get really, 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 really close, there's still going to be a slight angle of difference. And so being a witness or being a participant in something does not mean you know the truth of that situation. And anything that you think is happening for the other person is absolutely a projection until they share what's true for them. The other wrench that gets thrown in this, in the relationship works and gears, is that we may be even lying to ourselves about what the truth of the situation is. So we can't even report in on the truth because we're not present to it. All right. And so how you perceive your experience may vary greatly from your partner or the person across the table from you. It is definitely affected by your personality type, similar to the bank code that Vicky talked about, your love language that I talked about 2 weeks ago, and your personal history, deeply influenced by your personal history. All kinds of things in our personal history, whether it goes way back to our childhood, it's intergenerational, or it's something that happened this past week, okay? It doesn't matter. Our personal experience, our personal history is constantly influencing how we're showing up, okay? It can happen moment to moment, to the point of, like, literally someone can, you know, it happens mostly with a woman saying something to a man. Now, I love all the humans, okay? And
No way.
I do, I really do. There's this thing that I see so many times in man-woman relationships where a woman will say something to a man. He is single focused on a task. He literally does not hear her because his brain is wired to stay focused on whatever the task it is at hand. This is not a fault. It's just a way that the body operates. It's not his fault. That's what he's doing. And the woman will conclude that he's not listening to me, he doesn't care, and he doesn't hear me. And sometimes, oftentimes, what I have experienced that is actually happening is he's usually focused on whatever it was. And a lot of times, the thing that he's focused on is something for her. So she's not only off, she's like way off. Okay. And we'll take that and run with it. Okay. So Steve Genovese, I see you over there nodding your head. Talk to me.
This just happened yesterday. Kimberly just brought it up.
Yeah.
Where I was focused on working out some Canadian auto insurance for her, right? Making sure that
For my
she's-
Canadian trip, D.
Yeah.
And he was doing it for me. Like, I didn't even know it was something I needed. Like talk about being my hero, right? Totally, 100%, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Keep going.
well, no, I brought it up to you.
Well, so he interrupted me and inside something I was doing, and we have an agreement. We have an agreement because we both work from home.
Yeah.
And so during the day we don't talk to each other. Like literally, we don't talk. Like we might ships that pass in the night and wink and pinch each other's butts or throw a kiss, right? That kind of stuff. But we don't actually get into conversations about things during the day because we're in the zone. And I was in the zone doing what I was doing for my work day, and he just shows up and starts talking about insurance. And I'm like, dude, we have an agreement. We don't do this. But he was singly focused. And it was for me. Like he could and I had to like stop myself and go like, wow, this would be like me stopping him in the middle of buying me a dozen roses and going, what are you doing? Like, I mean, that's what he was doing. He was doing something very, very sweet for me. And, and he broke an agreement.
Yeah. And so Steve, I just want to check in, your love language is acts of service, yes?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, totally. And so he's literally loving on Kimberly. Steve is loving on Kimberly. And she's like, yo, you're not listening to me. You don't care about me. But like,
broke your agreement.
you broke your agreement. You're breaking the rules.
Yeah.
Okay. And nothing, like, he's actually doing something to create more connection and intimacy, to serve, support the relationship.
Yeah.
And we sometimes get it really, really wrong. And so this is an invitation to repair the breach. So before we get to that, and I want to give you a couple more ideas, and then we're going to get to the repair part. Okay. So thank you all so much for that example. It was perfect. Perfect illustration of that point. All right. So what doesn't work when there's a breach? And this is the stuff, by the way, that people usually run into. These are kind of default behaviors that people tend to try to do when there's a breach. All right. So avoiding connection, conversation, all the stuff, whatever, avoiding. Then there's silence. Okay. That's not necessarily the same as avoiding. That's sometimes like, it can be, what do they call it? Stonewalling. Okay. Like kind of, I'm out of here. I'm not really present. And
I'm a pro.
What's that?
I'm a pro.
Yeah. expert silent treatment.
Yeah.
And then there's the more aggressive, like attacking. Okay. And that might come in the form of rapid fire complaints or kind of very pointy conversation, sharp tones, either in voice or behavior. And then blame, the BS and J, blame, shame, and justification. Okay. That just keeps you in that loop. Well, this is your fault. And shame on you, and here's why I did this, and this is, it's okay because X, Y, and Z, and it's your fault anyway, so poo-poo on you. Okay, so yeah, breach, that's breach land. This does not work. It only widens the breach. All of those behaviors, and of course there are more, this is not an exhaustive list, but there are more things that can contribute to the breach and expand it. All right, so what does work if you're in a breach? So this is while you're in it. You haven't even moved into repair yet, but this is the thing that is the on-ramp to prepare, but it's while the breach is happening. One is literally just naming it. Hey, I feel disconnected. So Steve wrote, if you're getting that rapid fire complaint going on, like, blah, 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 these things are all wrong, you can be like, it's vulnerable. And you can say, hey, I feel really disconnected because of this, as I hear this whole list of things that are wrong, I feel disconnected. So that's naming it. And then there's you can have an honest reflection. So one is to not take it personally and like, do your best to see what happened here, like kind of assess what happened. And again, each person's experience of the breach is gonna be a little different. So understand that one, don't take it personally that the other person has a different experience of it. And one person perceives a breach like you did at Kimberly, and the other person does not perceive a breach like you were, Steve, Genovese. Y'all are in two different places. So in that case, Kimberly could name, I feel a breach, you just broke the rule. So naming it and being honest about what's happening and don't take it personally. And then finally, responsible emotional expression. So it's fine to have emotions. I love emotions. Emotions are awesome, but I'm going to give you a distinction that is a way of moving toward more vulnerable communication, which will help you to more skillfully navigate intimate connection. So the first tip / distinction is using I language versus you language. I language says, I feel disconnected. I feel hurt, or I feel afraid in this situation. I don't know what's happening and I don't like it. When you say, I feel like, or hold on, that's the second distinction. Sorry. So I language versus you language. You language is, you did this, you broke the rule, or you are giving me so many things that I have to do and I can't get to it. So you versus I. So I language is personal and vulnerable. You language is distancing and increases the breach, and it feels safer specifically for our ego, not necessarily safer for our relationship, not necessarily safer for us. It's usually just the safer way to do it if your ego is involved. Okay. We all have egos. The egos keeps us alive. Don't shame the ego. It's not a bad thing. It just literally, sometimes it's a little immature and not helpful. All right. So first distinction is using I language, which is more vulnerable, versus using you language, which is very common in distancing. Second is I feel versus I feel like. So if you say I feel, that means it's an emotion. If you say I feel like, it's a projection. I feel scared versus I feel like you are a threatening presence in my life. I feel like you did this on purpose, or you did. It's always accusatory and pointy. You know better. It goes right there with the you language. Okay, so both of those distinctions I want you to keep in mind. Take a note about that. Do those two distinctions make sense? The I versus you, and then the I feel versus the I feel like. Yeah.
That's a perfectly stated distinction. Really super clear.
Cool. Glad that's helpful. All right. Repair. So we're gonna wrap it up with repair. And this repair piece is going to be rolling right into the exercise that I want to give to y'all to try out, because I promise you, even in the best relationship, usually in the course of a week, there's gonna be something that comes up. And so I have a really, really good exercise that will address the repair issue. So repair means addressing the breach and acknowledging the impact. That's usually the first part of addressing repair. Repair is, you first have to acknowledge, hey, there's a breach. That's the naming it part. Then you start addressing it. So you can agree to address the breach. And this is the tool I'm going to share with you. I'm going to put it into the chat. I'm going to describe it first, and then I'm going to put it into the chat. So when you're repairing, that openness, that clarity that Aris was mentioning, like having that space without judgment, okay, without the blame, shame, and justification, creating that space. You may need an appointment to do this, okay? Do not do this on the fly. Don't break the rules, Steve, Genevieve. I don't recommend having a repair conversation on the fly. I do recommend setting an appointment in order to address the breach that has happened, okay? This conversation was given to me by Kira McCown. I do not know where she got it from, but she's the co-founder of the Kimbra with Kimberly Genevieve. And she introduced me to this concept and this kind of script. I love this tool. It's so good. And it's called The Conversation to Restore Power, Freedom, and Full Self-Expression. So the way that it goes is to state what's so, no story. And that's basically like acknowledging what happened, okay? Then what's the impact on both parties, them and you? And then what's your commitment now? So it's a nice brief 3-step process. What's your commitment now? So I'm gonna put this in the chat for y'all to be able to read along. Landmark, okay, good, fantastic. I figured because it said full self-expression. I was like, that sounds very Landmark. So this is from Landmark. Kira's the one who told me about it. Very good. All right, hold on. Let me put that in the thing. Okay, so there you have it. It's not very cute in the chat, but whatever. The point is, so when you're stating what's so, it sounds something like, I said I'd be there at 3, it's 3:25, I'm late. Who's a late person? Not me, but do we know people who are late? No one's late. There are no late people present here. Awesome. So I'm late. Now we have less time, the impact on them and you, now we have less time to discuss our project and I'm in a total huff and you might be annoyed. So this is the person who's initiating the conversation, sharing. You can have a conversation both ways. Thanks, y'all. And then what's your commitment now? And then that's from here on out, I'll be sure to set an alarm, getting ready 15 minutes before I have to leave. Also, I'd also like to say, this is what she says, what Kira says, from here on out, you can count on me for. So that's a commitment that you're making. It's a new agreement that you're making with the person with whom you are in relationship. Okay, so.
But what if they do it again?
Well, you can be right, or you can be in relationship. So that is, that's the blame, shame, justification piece coming in of like, what if they do it again? And I just want to acknowledge, Aris, you said that and you shared it from your experience, and that's a real thing that comes up. I just want to acknowledge that. It's not a problem that you feel that way, and moving through being a responsible participant in relationship, if we keep counting the cost of the things that the other person has done, we're actually moving ourselves in further and further distance. We have to forgive and let go. We have to recognize as just as vulnerable as we feel in that situation, because there's vulnerability in that. You did it again. Like, hey, I feel hurt about this happening again. And I feel afraid that it could happen again, and then I'll feel this hurt again, and I don't like this. It's a very natural human experience. So I will never shame that. And we can work with our partners or work with people in our lives to say, hey, this really has an impact on me. And I think that's why the impact piece is so helpful, is so that we can get that impact conversation stimulates our empathy for the other person and their experience. Because we can actually, when someone describes their emotion or they describe how the situation impacted them, we can then put ourselves in their shoes or something like that and say, oh yeah, I can identify with a way that I have felt like that in the past. Okay, so cool. Yes, Kimberly and Steve. Yes, hand raised.
I was just inside of what Eris was bringing up, which is brilliant, is it's where it's, I find that if I can, if he's doing something over and over again, we'll sit down, or I'll just say me, if I'm doing something over and over again, what works for us, me being married 30, going on 32 years, is to sit down and be like, hey, I know he would say to me, right? Like, I know you made a promise to me that you're gonna not do this anymore. You just did it again. How can I help you? Like, I know you don't want to keep doing, you just told me you don't want to do this anymore, and you just did it again. How can I help you? Like, what's happening? How can I contribute? Because it, like, just like like quitting smoking, or taking on something new. We've we've learned to be with each other as we're growing into something new, and really respect that. We take each other at our word. If we've said that we're going to do something newly and we don't do it, that doesn't give us permission to beat on each other. It's our opportunity to say, hey, and we call it out. Like, we don't step over it either, because that doesn't do anything either.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And what I want to acknowledge about that is that's being an advocate for the other person. That's supportive of them. That's that curiosity of like, oh, something's going on. That's that acknowledgement of like, hey, there's something happening that is not normal. And that's huge. And then being additionally supportive and generous about that. Okay. All right, cool. Thank you for sharing that so much. Because that's a beautiful example of how people can team up to move through that repair process where you're both advocating for the health of each person in the relationship. And so the health of the relationship is supported as a result. All right, awesome. So last thing, bonus activity exercise is the sexy version. And this one is called Causing Wanting. It's from Allison Armstrong. She's so awesome. If I had another clone of myself, I would send my clone there to get certified by her, but I don't. And I have plenty of certifications, but I love her so much. And if you can do that magic again by putting what's on the chat in the thing again, yeah, and put the bonus exercise on that. And we're going to provide this bonus exercise for you. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are things that you can do. These are questions or inquiries that you can answer for yourselves about what supports or diminishes your desire to be physically intimate with your partner. I love this exercise because it gets to the heart of things that will boost connection and intimacy or get in the way of connection and intimacy. Knowing that will help us knowing these facts about one another will help us to navigate this intimacy, and specifically more sexual or sensual intimacy. I love this exercise because it gives you all like the codes, and sometimes even if you feel uncomfortable communicating these ideas, you can go to your paper. Here's the paper. And similar to the exercise that I gave y'all before, or doing the love language quiz, fill this out separately. Do not do this together. You are as an individual, your partner is an individual, then you fill it out for yourself, and then y'all come together and have a discussion, okay? Again, don't do this discussion on the fly. Make sure you discuss it within an appointment, okay? Or if you have a date time, if you have a scheduled date with your partner, you can say, hey, could we talk about this during our date time, so that you're not springing it on them and they don't have their paper with them, okay? So you want everybody to win. And for those of you who are listening and you don't have a partner, it's really good for you to do this causing wanting exercise for yourself, just so that you'll be ready to have that communication when you are in the place of moving in toward physical, sensual, sexual intimacy with a partner, okay? When/if you choose to do that. All right, so I love this exercise. I love Allison Armstrong. She's super awesome. This exercise comes from her book, The Queen's Code. It's super amazing, and I love her work in general. She has books and gives lectures and has whole programs, but she's super awesome. Anyway, this is an exercise that you too can do. So yay, super duper. All right, that's a wrap for the content that I have. I'm super excited. I would love to hear from each of you who are with us live. What's something that you're taking away? What's something that you're either taking away or looking forward to? What stands out for you?
For me, it's being able that bonus exercise. I think will be a good tool to enhance communication and get down to the root of things.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Ditto.
I have insight on what it's like for the other person.
Sure, go ahead. Oh, yes, that's what you mean. That's your comment. You have insight on what it's like for the other person. Got it. Thank you for that, Aris. Steve? Rope?
I think declaring it and naming it is probably a step that I'm not ever aware of. And maybe that's because there's multiple things in a row typically. And I don't usually I'm ambushed by whatever the first upset was. I don't know what it is. And then there's the avalanche. So stopping and getting to that could make a real difference.
Cool. So I'm going to invite you to do one more thing, add one more thing to what you're sharing there. I love what you just said. And I'd invite you to use the word historically so that you can put it in the past. So historically,
yes.
I love historically. It's such a good
one. Good one.
It's a good one. Historically,
Yes.
I haven't been able to see this, but now that I have XYZ information, thanks for this presentation, Tazima.
Right. Good job.
Now I can move forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
welcome.
really appreciate your share, Steve. And I'm wondering if you and I are in a relationship because I'm the avalanche.
Oh. I don't need more of that, Harris.
No. No, I can see where I've been that way.
Dorothy
Yeah.
Odell, what do you got for me? What stands out for you?
I'm interested in looking more at that bonus content. And, we bring sexy back in this relationship already, but adding to the spice would be nice too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I really love it. And one thing I'll say is that even though sometimes we want to jump to the spicy, but the rapport is not there, or we're experiencing a breach. And so I want to acknowledge, like, start with the stepping stone pieces. If you can't name it yet, practice that part. Okay. And then once you get to the like sexy bonus stuff, then it'll be smoother sailing because you'll have the tools. So practice the other pieces that are not as sexy, and then the sexy pieces will go much, much, much smoother. Okay. Cool. I don't know if April is still on, but if you have something else you want to share, you can either unmute or put it in the chat. Okay, cool. Steve, over to you. I'm done. Thank you all so much. This has been so much fun for me. Thank you for your contributions.
Thank you, Tazima. How
Sure.
could someone get more information from you?
All right. Well, one is that you could visit my website, and I'll get that for you in a moment. And if you really want to talk to me more, if you want to actually have a conversation, come see me. And that is for an initial chat session. So I'll put both of those in the chat. So my website.
I'll put them in the video.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. My website is infiniterelating.com. And if you want to visit me for an initial chat, I will absolutely send you, I will have a link for you in a moment. Please stand by.
All right. Well, thank you again, Tazima. I think all of your information was great and super useful. And anybody who, is struggling or experiencing, breakdowns and breaches and needs to or wants to repair those, this process will definitely make a difference. And I would add, I think it just takes a lot of practice sometimes, right? Just keep doing it and keep doing it and don't give up. I've done it 12 times. I'll do it again, right?
Endurance race, not a sprint.
Right. So thank you all for being a part of today's discussion. Appreciate you all being here. And we will do it again next week. And next week is a little more of a health spiritual experience that you won't want to miss. So See you next week at 7, and the recordings will be on YouTube and on the Facebook page for Magic, Money, and Leverage soon. So
for
thanks,
having me
everybody.
next time.